Welcome to another episode of Tools, Talents, and Techniques. I am thrilled to be joined by my guest, Mr. Dan Engel. We're going to go through his journey and some things, but before we do so, I just want to give our listeners just a couple snippets of what I know. That Dan believes in leading with love. Dan believes that doing good is a long game. That is the name of the book that he's coming out with, but more than anything, like, this is the essence of who this man is and what he's done. He and his work has first came across my path in a way that I didn't even realize. We'll get into it later. I don't want to have any spoilers here. But some of the work that he's done is just absolutely remarkable, and getting to meet him as the person that he is, it's not a surprise that he's made such an impact in our world. So without any further delay, here he is, Mr. Dan Engel. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dustin. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my journey with your audience, and I greatly appreciate the introduction you just made. I've lived a pretty productive life in my 62 years, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'll say. And so before we get into the deep end here, could you just give a brief introduction of yourself, like who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, very easy. My name is Dan Engel. What I do now is not what I've done my whole career, but I'll put it in these terms. I care deeply about making an impact in the communities in which I live and work in just every day. I believe that I'm alive to change the world. I'm a stage 4 melanoma survivor who's battled through 6 clinical trials. That's the really short version. But I grew up in LA, very, I would say, middle class, well off, whatever you want to call it. I never wanted for anything. Grew up in an Orthodox Jewish household where charity was an obligation from as young as we learned how to go to school, where we had to put pennies into the charity can every day. So charity is just part of my life. Went to UCLA undergrad and then went straight to grad school at Berkeley for a JD MBA, and started out my career as an investment banker on Wall Street in the mid-'80s, and made my way down to San Diego 25 years ago and became a nonprofit junkie somewhere in the middle of that journey. And now I help people ensure that they can leave a legacy for their family, especially when tragedy strikes. And I believe everyone should have access to the same strategies that the family offices have used to grow and protect wealth for generations. It's sort of long-winded. I hope that works, Dustin.
No, that works great. But I do want to dive into a couple of things there. So in what part of LA did you grow up in?
I actually grew up in Beverly Hills, but south of the tracks. 90211, not 90210. And and whether you know this or not, Dustin, there were tracks running through Beverly Hills. There were train tracks.
I did not know that.
There are train tracks along Santa Monica Boulevard that the trolley used to run on. And so there is the right and wrong side of the tracks.
Got it. When you mentioned you went to college, you went to undergrad, and then you became an investment banker. Was that the goal? Was that like your major in college that you were going to do that?
So as an undergrad, one of my best friends growing up, starting from kindergarten, his dad was a real estate developer, and I thought I wanted to be a real estate developer. And he went to school with me in college, and then we went to law school at the same time. But I thought I was going to be a real estate developer. So I started out at UCLA with an econ major. They didn't even have business degrees back in the early 80s. So I went to grad school at Berkeley, where they had the top real estate program in the country, with the intent that I would ultimately become a real estate developer. But with a JD MBA, I had 3 summers and 3 opportunities to try 3 different things. So the first summer, I actually worked for a real estate developer, one of the top developers in the United States. The next summer, I found my way to Wall Street, didn't even know that existed. but got a job at Solomon Brothers in the real estate finance group. And the next summer, I worked for a real estate law firm. So I saw about every side of real estate as you could find in 3 years, and decided I'd like the deal side of the business. And I decided to pursue a career where I started out working 80 to 100-hour weeks, and just learned everything I could learn from some of the smartest people you could ever be around. It was certainly an environment that uh, probably in hindsight was fairly misogynistic and not exactly uh, in today's world of acceptability on some of the things we said and did. But I certainly learned everything I could and worked on fun deals all across the country. And really, it's a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
What was it about working on the deal side that resonated with you so much? Was there something in your skill set or your aptitude?
I don't know that it was skill set. I think aptitude, what I really loved about the deal game is it was always a new product or a new city in the real estate world, right? I could be working on a hotel financing in Florida, and the next week working on a real estate development financing in Seattle area, and then a high-rise office building in Atlanta. And in each case, you have to learn what makes that local economy tick. To value real estate, you have to really understand the whole environment you're in. And so I was learning new cities and new economies every month. And I really enjoyed that part of it. It's that constant learning. It's a lesson I keep repeating to my kids and anybody who cares to listen. When you stop learning, it's time to move on. I'm 62 and I'm still learning every day, and I'm grateful for that opportunity and for having the open mind to want to keep learning every day.
Yeah, when you stop learning, you stop growing.
Absolutely.
So when you're doing the deal side, and so what was well, first of all, you mentioned like growing up with charity and being a big part. Even as you're going and you're working these long hours and hard hours, was that still something in your day to day and what you did? Was it, did you still find time to give back or do anything on the charitable side?
So at that time in my life, it was all with writing checks.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the privileges and obligations of making a good living is, and when you work 80 to 100 hours, it's really hard to give back with time, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not hard to write a check. A lot of people find it hard. I don't. I find it an obligation. Uh, it was when I moved to LA in 90, in 90, and was still at Solomon Brothers, and I went to work for a real estate restructuring firm. And the guy I worked for there actually spent a lot of time giving back at City of Hope. That was his favorite charity, and he gave back in time. Then I went to work for a guy named Andy Astrachan, who became my real mentor in life and someone who to this day, I value what he taught me more than almost anyone in the world. And Andy really showed me as a contemporary what it meant to give back with time. Andy was the guy who spent every Friday afternoon mentoring kids in Watts. And even at one point, one of the kids he mentored, his mom went to jail, and he brought him into his home and got him into a better high school. Ultimately, Johnny went off to college and law school, and now is a parent and owes everything to Andy. But Andy just really showed me what it meant to give back with time. I think it was really when I started giving more of my time when I got sick. I was in LA, it was 99, and I had my first bout with, at the time, stage 3 melanoma. And I had a 50% chance of it recurring. So I enrolled in a clinical trial. That was my first clinical trial in 99 to prevent recurrence, and decided to move to San Diego to be near my wife's family because they're really close to the kids. And 5 years later, after that clinical trial ended, and my cancer came back a year later. So this is like 6 years, a year after the clinical trial ended. I spent 2 years doing nothing but battling for my life, going between 10 surgeries, radiation, gamma knife surgery on a brain tumor, and 6 clinical trials. And
How did I want to like? How did you first get diagnosed with? Was it just a general screening, or was
oh
it you?
no, this was um, God looking down on me and my family, literally. I used to get a short haircut every 4 weeks. It was just like clockwork. And one day I'd come home from the haircut and I was playing on the steps of my home underneath the skylight with my 1-year-old daughter. And my wife walked by and looked down and said, "Gee, you got a spot on your scalp. You ought to get it checked out." And I went to a dermatologist for the first time in my life, because who goes to a dermatologist if you don't think you need to? The dermatologist took a biopsy, called me back the next day, and said, "I'd like to see you to discuss the results." I said, "All right, tell me when you want to see me." And he said, "You tell me, I'll fit you in."
Mhm.
Those are 5 words you don't ever want to hear in your life from a doctor. You tell me, I'll fit you in. You tell me 6 words. Um, Got
Yeah,
to get my math right. I used to be quicker on the math. At
hey, that's all
62
right.
and
That's
all
all
the chemo,
right.
I'm not as quick. But it was so. Um, he said it was stage 3 melanoma, and the biopsy showed, um, you know, that it that I needed to get a full, like, excision. It was about the tumor, the scab itself was like a thumbnail on the top of my scalp.
Mm.
But if I had not gone in to see him, the cancer had already spread, it turned out, to lymph nodes in my neck. Had the sun not been shining down through the skylight, and this is why I say God looking down on me and my family, and it had gone on even 3 months more before I got it checked, that cancer could have spread from one lymph node in my neck throughout my body and metastasized elsewhere. And at that time, there's really nothing scientifically to cure stage 4 melanoma. There still really isn't. There's been a lot of advancements, but I was lucky. I mean, if I can't view that as God looking down on me and my family, and I'm not a particularly religious person anymore, but I'm a spiritual person, and
Mhm.
that's what I believe happened.
Well,
It's extraordinary, right? And I talk about the haircut, and the woman who gave me my haircut had noticed a scab like 4 haircuts prior, and said, "Gee, did you cut yourself?" No, when would I cut myself on my head? And she never mentioned that the scab was still there the next 3 appointments. So when I showed up with, because they did the full uh, dissection on my scalp and had to do a skin graft for my chest, because your scalp can't pull that tight. And I showed up with a big chunk this big missing from my scalp. She just like turned white as a ghost.
mhm.
And I said, "Look, you didn't know. Now, what I'd like you to do is anytime you see something like that on another client, please share my story and send them to a dermatologist ASAP."
Yeah.
Always
Wow.
learning and always sharing.
Yeah. Um. Wow. So from that, you got into that clinical trial, and how did that? How does that work with the dermatologist and the doctor? Are they saying like, okay, these are your options, like these are the things we recommend this one? Like, how does that
Once
process work?
once you once you leave the dermatologist and go to the oncologist, or in this case, it was a surgical oncologist,
Hmm.
the dermatologist is really out of the equation. And it was
Okay.
the discussion with my oncologist where it says, "Okay, you've got a 50% chance of recurrence in the next 5 years." My question was, what can I do to boost the odds in my favor. And
Mhm.
at that point, this was 99, there were only 2 clinical trials in America for stage 3 melanoma to prevent recurrence. So I had a choice if I could enroll, and you have to qualify for one trial at Sloan Kettering in New York, or in Santa Monica, where I was living in L.A. And I chose the trial in L.A., moved to San Diego not long after, but I would go to L.A. every 3 months, and I would get scans every 6 months and just see how I was doing. And at the end of 5 years, you're sort of deemed out of the woods. But a year after the trial ended, I had that first recurrence. But I had a similar doctor call. Here, I had felt something behind my ear, and I went to an ear, nose, and throat guy who took a biopsy, and I got a call from him. Yeah, you got to come into the office. And this was a whatever morning. I see him 9 in the morning or something, and he proceeds to tell me, yeah, the cancer's back, and it's in the parotid gland too. Um, and I said, okay, I'm going to go see my guy in L.A. And this is one of those instances that happened to me where I recognize that I'm pretty unique in things going my way. I called my oncologist in LA that morning. He said, stop eating because you're going to drive up to LA and you're going to get on a scanner for a CT scan and an MRI, and you need to not eat for several hours. Then you're going to see me and we're going to see what happens. So I drove to LA from San Diego. So that was 2.5 hours at that time of day. Get on a scanner for a CT scan of most of my body, then drive to another facility for a brain MRI. Each of those takes, at least an hour. Then I go see my oncologist. I think he waited till probably 6 o'clock that night to see me. We had gotten a wet, they call it a wet reading from the radiologist that showed the cancer was back. And I scheduled surgery that same day before driving home. And I guarantee you, most people in America have never had an experience where they're told their cancer comes back and within 8 hours have had new scans, seen their surgical oncologist, and had surgery scheduled,
Well,
including a drive to another city.
well,
Yeah.
and so when all this is happening, like where are you? Like, how's your family handling this? Like, what about your day job? I mean, is
Those
everything
are
else
those are
kind of
great questions, Dustin. So my kids at that point were, so this is 6 years. So Sam's 10, Jordan's about 8. I think I worked for a company at this point that I was very senior in the company. I reported directly to the CEO and COO, and they just said, just get healthy, do what you have to do. Again, another example of being very fortunate that I didn't have to worry about, if I take off time to go get treatment or whatever, am I going to still have a job? Am I still going to be able to put food on the table? I had great insurance, which helped. My kids, at that point, they understood um, better than at 1 and 3 or 1 and 4. Um, and it was it was hard on them, but because we were in San Diego and they were close to their grandparents who lived nearby, there was a lot of support. So when I had to go to LA for treatment and stuff, there was, they had a lot of support.
Mhm.
So I was lucky. I still, for the first year of that next 2 year battle, I was pretty well able to function and work mostly full days. But I also, at this point, is when the light bulb went off, and we decided to start the Miracle League of San Diego.
Hmm.
My ex-wife and I had seen an episode of Real Sports with Brian Gumbel several years before this, and Frank DeFord did a piece, and Dustin, Frank DeFord was probably the best storyteller of our generation, bar none.
Yeah. 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 It's good. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't hold a candle to Frank DeFord and his ability to bring out just the best. And he had interviewed this little redheaded girl, Lauren Gunder, who's 13, living in Conyers, Georgia, with brittle bone disease and legally blind. And the fact that I remember her name 22 years later is amazing.
Well,
But
that
did
just
this
shows you how much of an impact that made. Like to hear you say
exactly.
it
And
and explain it.
anybody who saw that episode remembered it because you cried at the end of it. And Brian Gumbel, when he's interviewing Frank at the end, says, I was a blubbering idiot watching this. And he said, yeah, you're human. And so we fell in love with this concept of the Miracle League and actually wrote a check. 3 years later, they did an update piece and interviewed other families who decided to start their own Miracle League based on same episode. So we decided if our kids could not have that opportunity to play mainstream Little League, we would want them to have it, and decided to start our own Miracle League. So sent a $500 check, got a 3-ring binder that frankly I thought was useless, but started off on how do you start a nonprofit?
Yeah.
So I'm trained as a lawyer, but have never practiced law. And at the time, I did the paperwork and formed the entity. And once the entity got formed, then it's like, okay, now we got to raise money and figure out where do we build a field. And Miracle League is a baseball league for kids and adults with special needs.
Yeah.
Every
So
player
that's what
has
I
a
wanted to
spot.
go back before we went back. Like, could you just walk our audience through what Miracle League is?
Yeah. So it's a baseball league for kids and adults with special needs. We built 2 rubberized fields that accommodate wheelchairs and walkers and the sight impaired. Every player has a buddy who helps them on and off the field. And in fact, over the years, I've come to realize that what we are doing, and I trademark this phrase, is nurturing philanthropic souls, because we're teaching kids at a young age how good it feels to give back and help others. So every player is a buddy, and the Padres have been my partners since day one. There are now over 500 Miracle Leagues around the country, but I'd like to think our Miracle League of San Diego, now finishing its 17th year of operation, is one of the best run in the country. I'll stand up to anyone. It's the best recreational opportunity for kids with special needs and adults. We have players aged 5 up to 49. I have 350 players in our league. We have a competitive division with players who don't have buddies. And the truth is, we didn't know what we were doing in starting it. We didn't have any connection to the special needs community. We just had this affinity for baseball and wanting kids to have that opportunity. And so for 2 years, while I'm battling for my life, going again, 10 surgeries, radiation, 6 clinical trials, I had a purpose outside of work, because I worked for someone who said, just get healthy. And I was so senior and set things up in a way that they didn't need me day to day. I was actually pretty good at my job. The little bit of my ego showing up, but it's the truth.
Hey, wait,
More
shout it.
confidence. I know
love
what
it.
I'm
I
good
love it.
at. I know what I'm not good at.
I love
But
it.
this gave me purpose. And I would, I mean, I remember very clearly I was in the middle of 4 rounds of something called biochemotherapy. And Dustin, this meant I was in the hospital for 5 days at a time, getting a combination of 3 forms of chemotherapy plus 2 forms of immunotherapy, all 5 of them highly toxic. So 5 days of that, then had to wait and go to the doctor's office for IV infusion the next day. And then 5 days of home IV infusion. And then I had 10 days to try to recover before going through it again. So it was a 21-day cycle. I did 4. Nobody ever had done 4 before me. And I had gone from probably 170 pounds down to 130. I was almost at high school wrestling weight,
Wow.
pants falling off me, and I was going to community meetings talking about Miracle League and trying to raise money so that we could build a field. But it gave me purpose. And no matter how cold or thin or scary life was, I had this purpose outside of seeing my kids grow up, to build the Miracle League. And so you asked again about my family and how were the kids dealing with it. When it kept coming back, the conversations became more difficult. They'd say, how did God let this happen to you? And I had a hard time coming up with a good answer for that. But people ask, how do you keep going? I was like, well, I'm going to see my son, his bar mitzvah at the age of 13. Then I want to see my daughter's bat mitzvah when she turned 13. And I set all these, I would call intermediate term goals. I didn't believe short-term goals worked for me. And I thought long-term, given the prognosis, was too much. When I was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma in 2005, the 5-year survival rate was less than 5%. So by all odds,
Wow.
I've beaten the crap out of all the odds. But something I always say, the only odds that matter, the only statistic that matters is yourself. Everybody in science is an N of 1, a study of 1, right? So what do you always need to do to increase your chances of survival? And that was the way I lived my life. And Miracle League became a big part of that, Dustin. It gave me this purpose outside of seeing my kids at school, that if I could develop this, build a rubber field and figure out how to bring people out there, how cool would that be? And I thought, honestly, at the time, we're going to find people to run it and we'll have built it and it'll be great. But the very first opening day, which was in May 2007, came 2 weeks after my first clean scans in 2 years, when I was deemed in remission. It is a very spiritual place. We had no idea what we're doing. We were signing up people the very last day. And we had, I managed to get on the air with Scott and BR, who were the local sports radio guys, and talked about Miracle League. I was supposed to be on for 1 segment, wound up being on for 2. And all of a sudden we had people calling in trying to volunteer. And all of a sudden, okay, how do we recruit players? I didn't know anyone with special needs. Had to figure that.
That's what's so remarkable about this. That's one of the many things that's remarkable about this. There was no direct link to this community. It's just like you were inspired and you were like, how can I be involved? And you did it. And then it just blossomed from there. I'm not taking away that there's a lot of other things and hard work involved, but the fact that you're like, I don't have a direct link to this community, but like, no. I still want to make it happen.
And and once I was out there, if you see my smile from the picture on our very first opening day, it's still the best smile I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah.
Being on that field and having Randy Jones, who's a Cy Young pitcher for the Padres, being that opening day MC, and Jake Froman, the very first player who ever signed up, who was in a wheelchair, throwing out the very first pitch, and cutting the ribbon. And now Jake, 17 years later, he played for 12 years or so, went off to college at U of A, has graduated, he's come back, and he reached out, can I volunteer again? And he comes out and coaches. And he's on the sidelines in his wheelchair, and I got to tell you, doesn't. I don't understand much of what he says other than I love you and how are you? But the fact that he comes out 17 years later as a coach, stories like that, it just, it warms my heart. The community I've been able to build and the family that I never thought I'd have. And I had nothing to do with special needs, but it's now a blessing. If you know families with kids with special needs and adults with special needs, they'll tell you they learn more from their kids every day than we could ever imagine. And I've seen it. And I had a boy, this story still, I'll wind up crying. I'm sorry. Our very first year, one boy signed up, Kyle Wyverney, who was used a walker, and he had a club foot, and I can't even tell you all the host of issues. But he came out to Miracle League, and it was 2 years later, and one day his mom tells me it's the last day of the season. She said, Kyle, because of Miracle League, Kyle has decided he wants to walk on his own, and he's been practicing. Okay. So we've had the same families for 2 years. It's small still. We haven't grown that much. And I know what's going to happen. But Kyle gets up to the plate, and his buddy, and he hits the ball, and his buddy takes the walker away. To everyone else, it looked like he was fumbling. I knew what was going on. Kyle starts walking towards first, okay? And he doesn't stop. And he keeps going to second. And if you look, he doesn't have a smile on his face because it's hard work. But he's walking for the first time without his walker. And by the time he gets to third base, everyone in the stands, we're on our feet, bawling our eyes out because we can't believe this. And he comes home, and I'm telling you, I don't know whether he tried to slide or he just fell on the plate in exhaustion. But
Yeah.
to this day, that effort, I mean, that's a miracle. He learned to walk because we decided to create this Miracle League. And then he kept growing, and he became a mainstream Little League player later in his life. And he came back for our 10-year anniversary and said, can I play? And I'm like, of course you can play again. Miracles happen every day if you keep your eyes open for them.
That's such a beautiful story. And I'm sure there's so many that you can share and things that have happened over the years. And this is one of the things that I know, Dan, when I saw you, I guess a couple weeks ago that we talked about, the first time I became aware of, Miracle League and that field was a couple of years ago. And my family and I were meeting some friends that lived in North County, and San Diego Park is was in between. So we're like, oh, we'll go to this park. There's a playground there. The kids can play. And when we went to the playground, it was like, oh wow, like this is a really nice playground for the kids. I was like, it's like really nice. It was wide. There was no and we didn't know it.
You didn't know that it was built specially for adapted.
Yeah. We didn't know. It was just like, wow. It was just like, it's almost like you go somewhere with like big wide lanes for driving, and like just everything was just very well done. And I was like, wow, this is really nice. There were probably a couple of special needs kids there that I just, we were just talking about our stuff. We were stuck in our own,
right,
minds. But as we're sitting there and you're starting to piece things together, I look over and I see the people playing on the baseball field. And I was like, I could have swore I saw somebody in a wheelchair on the baseball field. And then the game was going on, and I was like, oh my God, like that, there's no dirt there. Like that's like a special needs baseball field. Then I saw like the crowd and the people cheering and things were going on. And when you say something that warms your heart, literally, like I could feel like a shock wave of warmth through my body of just surprise. And then I just welled up with, it was just overwhelming to see how many people were so happy and just were so proud of like what was going on. And I there have been few times in my life where I've felt like that, like just tears of compassion and joy just come out for that. So
Yeah, Dustin,
it's so to hear you tell that story, it's like, yeah, yeah,
that would, and
that's
so
what
for
that's what you guys do.
yeah, so for you to say that, Dustin, that means a lot. And what you can't realize, so our community and our mission, I say, is to make sure every participant walk away saying they had a great day, whether you're a player, a buddy, a coach, a parent, or a volunteer. And we've never failed. And for the parents, they need, they're on call 24/7, unlike parents of kids that don't have those needs. And to give them an opportunity for an hour to sit in the stands and talk to other parents just like them and share their own issues, and to be able to watch their kids having fun, knowing they have a buddy who can help their player, their child or adult, have a good time and smile and know that they're taken care of and safe. So the players get to play, the buddies get to develop self-confidence, awareness, compassion. They become a philanthropic soul, as I said, and the parents get to just enjoy for an hour. And the volunteers come out and just are blown away. People like you walk up. We had, before our 15-year anniversary, a couple were walking through the park with their dog and stopped by and said, "Hey, what's that?" And I stopped to talk to them and tell them what Miracle League was. The next week, they came back, said, "Do you remember us?" I said, "Of course I do." And frankly, I remember the dog. It was such a cute doodle. And they said,
Yeah.
"Well, we'd like to support your organization. How would you like us to pay?" I said, "We'll take a Venmo. We'll do, a check. We'll bring you back a check." An hour later, they walked over with a $10,000 check.
Wow.
Because I talked to them. I was like, it's not because I talked to them. It's because I told them what was really going on the field.
Yeah.
And I call it the happiest place in San Diego. Some people say it's the happiest place in the world. I try not to go that overboard. But I'm really proud of and everyone who comes out, their buddies who are there. When you become a buddy, you do it because you love being there. You may come the first time as a 10-year-old kid and be a little nervous because you don't know what to expect. And you may be paired with someone in a wheelchair who's not very verbal. Or my daughter was paired with a girl not in a wheelchair, but with cerebral palsy and on the autism spectrum, who I could not understand her words. But she figured out how to communicate and was a buddy for the same person for 8.5 years until she went off to college. And this is what happened. So many kids have decided to pursue careers in special ed or occupational therapy because they worked at Miracle League. I had, this is sort of at after COVID, when we came back, because we obviously had to take during COVID. We were at Bell Middle School, our other location, and there was a TV crew out there filming. And I get tired of doing the interviews because I've done it. I'm not the story, right? I'm really not. The field, the people, the buddies, the coaches, the volunteers, they're the story. So I had Natalie Alfaro, who's a dear, sweet girl who has been a buddy for her brother, Giancarlo, for all 17 years now. And she started at 6 years old, even so younger than most buddies start. And she's talking to the cameraman and talking about how great it feels to be back at Miracle League and how much it means to her. And she says, we're only here because of Dan, and Dan's like my second dad. Like, he's seen me grow up, and I can't believe that. And, when people tell you that, it's like, yeah, I love her. I adore her. This girl I'd give anything for her to help her in whatever she wanted. But when people tell you that level of impact, kind of shocks you and blows you away.
Hmm.
And I don't know how to deal with that sometimes. It's hard to be humble with that, but I try to be humble, but the impact, I feel I feel lucky to be alive every day. Every day I'm alive is a good day. And I believe I'm alive to change the world. That's why I give back every day. I didn't go through what I went through just to be a selfish, you know, person. My role is to make a difference in the world every day.
I want to unpack that a little bit about what you're saying about, being humble, but like there's there's a certain level of confidence that you have to say, like, I'm here to change the world.
Yeah.
Humbly. No. So hold on. Like, let's unpack this. Like, but humbly, I feel like I can make a difference, and I can because I've seen the difference that I made in people's lives, and something that may seem small or be small in the moment, or like you don't have to have it all figured out. Like you said, when you first started, you were like, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to do it. And you've experienced that sometimes these acts that you do, if taken with the right motive, with your heart and your head are aligned, um, that you can make an impact and you can change the world. So yeah, that balance of being like, I'm going to do it, like I'm confident, but humbly, I'm not going to do it myself. Like there's something really sweet there. And I don't mean just sweet, like sweet and soft. I mean something sweet, like the sweet spot of a baseball bat. Like it's a pure balance. Like when you hit something the right way, where golf ball, whatever it is, like there's something real sweet there. So I hear what you're saying, but I also understand that there's
Well,
levels. There's levels
yeah,
to
and I
this.
appreciate that. That's and there is a balance. You can't. I don't believe you can be successful at anything without having the confidence to deliver in what you set out to deliver. And it ties into this. This is a perfect time to why I'm writing my new book. I believe that what you do matters. What you do matters, and everyone needs to share that belief in themselves that what you do matters. And sometimes people ridicule you for that. Some people tear you down, and I hate that. That I hate when people tear other people down. Right? We need to always be lifting people up, and I've been fortunate. I've worked a lot of different jobs in my career. I've been very successful. Miracle League, 17 years. It's about lifting people up and telling them what you do matters. Lead with love. Whatever you do it with love and passion, love and kindness, gratitude. These are the messages that I believe make you successful. And we've talked about all the things I've done. Well, I feel like there have been many avenues I've tried. This is why my book is called Doing Good is a Long Game. I've tried to pursue things that I thought were really good and meaningful. That while I may have succeeded in some part of it, I did not succeed financially, but you got to keep going.
Hmm.
And I truly believe that changing the world is not just what I do at Miracle League. It's encouraging people to live authentic lives. Understand that you make a difference. Well, you may not think you do, but every interaction you have with another human, you're making a difference. It's funny. I'm there. There's a social group, a social club called the Optimist Club. Are you familiar with Optimist, Dustin? You've heard
Not
of
the
Lion.
not the club. I know
So
what's
you
it?
know of Lions Club or
Yeah,
Rotary Club,
yeah.
right? Well, there's the Optimist Club, and they have an Optimist creed that they read at the end of every meeting, and I keep a version of it in my wallet because it's so special. And the way I learned about the Optimist Club is it was our second year of Miracle League, and at that point we operated out of just a shed, and we'd grill hot dogs, and we had a cooler for the ice, for the put the hot dogs on. And one day I'm opening up the field, and some gentleman's walking up with our cooler, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Dan Engel." He says, "Hi, I'm Warren Rabs. I'm with the Optimist Club. We were here last week volunteering, and I noticed your cooler was broken, so I took it home, ordered a spare part, and fixed it." I'm like, "Who does that?" But the Optimist Club does,
Yeah,
and they support Miracle League every year. But
that's funny.
part
Yeah.
of the Optimist creed is to treat every living creature with a smile, and it's all about treating others and not having time to dig into your own crap, right? You're always about seeing the optimism in others and seeing the good in others. And I truly believe that's one of the most important lessons coming off. I didn't want to talk politics, but coming off a very polarizing um, session, polarizing period of time, it's so important to remember the good in people and to look for the good in people. And even though we may not agree with everyone on everything, you've got to get to the point where you can actually engage with people and listen, right? Everyone's got a story to tell. Everyone has their own stuff they've been through. And if you're not willing to actually care about someone and listen to someone complaining, I don't want to hear it, right? We all have our own journeys. And leading with love means caring about people. And I believe that's somehow God gave me the strength, and I've been around people who've taught me that that's more important than anything.
You mentioned writing the book. Doing good is a long game. When you when you're putting your thoughts and your ideas and your feelings onto paper, is there a practice that you've had? Like, where do you start when you're writing a book like this? Are you taking a journal? Are you going through your life story and you're writing things down of when you thought about this? Like, how did the book come to be?
That this book came to be. I wrote my first book, Thriving Through Cancer, about my
Okay,
health journey.
so sorry,
And
excuse me. You've already been through the book writing journey, but for this one, for
yeah,
this
right.
topic,
So I
like
was saying,
how are you breaking this down?
so for that one, it was really about my health journey. So it was very chronological.
Mhm.
That was chronological, very important to tell that story in a linear fashion. Part of what I'm talking about in doing good is a long game is life is not linear. So in thinking about it, I put together an outline of thoughts and topics I want to share. I thought about and I've put an outline about exemplars, people in my life that I've learned from, who to me lead that authentic life, lead with love and kindness and gratitude every day. And I want to share some of their stories and what they've meant to me.
Okay.
So that's not linear, right? There can be a grouping of those work related impacts. So it's still developing. I'm not as far into it as I'd like. When I get into a writing mode, I just sit and I type. I
Mhm.
and I just sit at the computer and it just starts to flow. But I also edit as I go. I'm weird in that way. I'll edit as I'm going and go back and rewrite. Just I think it probably took me 20 hours to write my first chapter that I shared with you.
Mm.
and to hone it. And it still needs work. But then I'll read, when I get to the next chapter, I read the first one and start typing the next one. I have a different file open with my notes of what I want to write and the topics, and, pulling some quotes that I want to share. It it's not a linear process. It's just where my brain goes at a certain point of time when stuff comes to me. When stuff comes to me that I want to write, I absolutely go and put it into, even if I can't write, I'll put those notes down into the outline
Yeah.
and just throw them out there because I forget things. So that my process, well, when it comes to me, I definitely open that file and add the notes of the stories I need to tell.
Well, just like you mentioned before, everyone takes their own journey in life. Like, what everyone has their own process of going about something, and especially something like this. And that and even your process can evolve. But what I've seen so far is really good. That's why I was asking. Like, wow, this is this is good.
Well, I know, and I know you're asking me because your whole theme is tools and techniques, and what have I used in my years? What has helped me? And I wish I could.
I think writing things down in general, like, is thinking, having the idea, but if you never write them down or have some type of process to making a thought into reality or whatever it is, like, then like that's a big piece of it. So that's why I was wondering, like, how you went about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and you're right. And especially as one gets older and one's memory becomes less good, less quick, I have to write things down. For me, that's critical. And if I don't write it down, everything I do, if I'm not writing lists, I can't follow through because I can't remember. And I have this affliction called chemo brain, which, even though it's been over 18 years since I'd had chemo, I still get afflicted by this inability to find words. And it's not really memory loss. It's just I can't find a word that I know. And it frustrates the crap out of me.
No.
And that's different than writing things down. But again, that's my journey. And the flip side is I'm alive, so deal with it. And I just keep doing what I do.
I want to before we close up this conversation. There's things that you've touched on that are still resonating with me, and it's going to and meeting you and getting to know you better. I know this is going to continue to develop. And
I hope so.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I'm not. You're not getting away from me.
You neither, Dustin.
So one of the things that I really think about when you talk about change, like, you never know what it is in that moment, or what you can say, or what you can write, or what you can build. But just took that one thing that you did, that you'll never know, like, what ripple effect that will have. And just, I mean, I'm so grateful for everything that you've done so far, even to this point, because I know you're not done. But just think about
close.
But
not
think
even
about
close, my
not
friend.
even close. But think about all the ripples in other people's lives that you made that you probably don't even see. I mean, I'm sure you can't see all of them, but hopefully in some way that you feel them in your life, in the joy and what people feel in their lives. I'm really hoping that you feel that you get that
Dustin,
love back.
there's no doubt. In every Saturday I'm at Miracle League, it resonates. I mean, I was there during the season, which we have a spring and a fall season. I'm there all day Saturday from 9 a.m. when we start setting up till 5 o'clock when we finish our seventh game. And I announce games when our regular announcers aren't there. So this season, I've had 1 week where I announced 5 out of 7 games, and this week I didn't have to announce any. And then I'm there Sunday, from 9:30 to 12 with our competitive division, and kids who play by the rules and we had a triple play 2 weeks ago.
That's amazing.
And yes, an absolute real life triple play. And the kids who got out, cheer on the players who got them out. Okay. This is the joy of Miracle League. I experience it every day, and I see people, and I see buddies who were there before and come back. And I see on Facebook, kids who are buddies who are now nurses or whatever, and I'm so proud. And yeah, there's no shortage of appreciating the ripple effect.
Yeah.
And I love that you use those words, ripple effect, because one of the exemplars I'm going to write about in my book is a guy in town who runs the Conrad Prepis Foundation. He came out from Pittsburgh, and he challenged me when we're talking about some impact to think about ripple effects, because I was talking about healthcare and really serving in the community, and there are so many ripples, and if to be a really effective philanthropist, effective giver of time, effective influencer, you have to think about all those ripples. Think downline. If I do this, what happens next? And what happens next? And what happens next? So as I think about healthcare and early intervention, which I think is so important, I'm not a doctor, but I know the patient experience more than anybody in the world. I mean, there are others who know it that well, but as well as anybody in the world, early intervention is so key to success, to be able to conquer medical issues. Okay. So if you go into less affluent communities where people are more afraid of doctors and don't have that trust factor, and you think about how they're afraid to go get a test. Okay, let's say you're in an African American community where they're really afraid of doctors, and mom doesn't go and winds up having cancer that is not treatable at that point. Now she dies because she was afraid to get treated early and see when you've been in pain. Now what happens to the kids who aren't being driven to school as much? And you think about all those downward effects.
Yeah.
And so to be truly impactful, you have to look at all that, all the ripple effects. And I really appreciate you recognizing that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I would say further from that, and maybe this is a topic for part two. So I know we're running out of time here, but it's like to be able to understand that it's not just like what's in front of you, but it's down the line, but also understanding that at some point you have to let go of the results too, where it's not right. I mean, because that's a whole other part of it of like you doing something because it's the right thing to do and it's a good thing, then like even though yes, these are the results and the intended results and the results of the results, at some point you need to just trust that your instincts and what you're doing is the right thing to do, even though
and you have to trust that you've taught others to take over and follow in those same footsteps, but let them chart their own path.
Yeah,
I have frankly a very difficult time letting go. I'm pretty controlling. I like things done my way. I feel like I know how to do things the right way. And I think historically in my career, on the one hand, that's really been good because as my mentor says, I'm more class at getting shit done. And it's not just the act of doing it, it's knowing what needs to get done. But that's probably held me back a little because I've not been a great manager of people and giving stuff away, which is work in assignments way, which is part of why I'm so proud about Miracle League, because I actually have, with this buddy program, really assigned all the doing good to, over the years, thousands of people.
Yeah.
And I can look you in the eye every day and say, I know I make a difference and everybody I've impacted is making a difference.
Yeah.
And they realize that doing it the right way, that's what I teach them. You've got to always do it the right way and do the right thing, even if it's hard.
Yeah.
And that'll open us up to part 2, because I'd be happy to do this again. I unfortunately I tend to run on. I think we've gone past
No,
our
I think
hour
that's
allotment.
that's all right. It was a hour of all good things, man. So again, Dan, before we leave, can you share like where people can find you? If there's any I don't know, I know you're on LinkedIn, but is there anywhere else you're on?
Yeah, miracleleagueofsandiego.org. So miracleleagueofsandiego.org. That's the nonprofit. That's for that. I'm on LinkedIn. I actually do have a professional career where I help people with leaving legacies and life insurance and annuities and stuff like that. That's Dan at jaglegacy.com. I appreciate the opportunity to share that. But most
Absolutely.
importantly, just look me up. Come out to Miracle League on a Saturday and enjoy it. I guarantee you'll walk away with a smile on your face. I think I came up with the hashtag Smiles for Miles. If I didn't, I'll still take credit for it. Humble me, always throwing out the good stuff.
Yeah.
But come on out. I'm so grateful, Dustin, for the opportunity to share my journey with your listeners. I think what you do in my meeting you was we were destined to be new friends and pursue stuff together and keep making the world a better place day by day.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that.
All right,
Dan,
amen, my brother.
amen. I'll include all the ways to contact you in the show notes, but thank you so much for your time today and everything that you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dustin.